Hotep, how you doing, brothers and sisters? It's good to see y'all. It's good to be here, and it's wonderful, actually, on a very, very powerful occasion for us to come on this May 21st to have this wonderful conversation, sort of a summit on Sudan. And we are joined, actually, in the world by the hundreds of people who are attuning to the work that we are doing here. And I just want to announce a couple of things. Thank you very much. Want to announce a couple of things, and one of them is that Jalal Hashim has published an incredible book called "To Be or Not to Be: Sudan at Crossroads: A Pan-African Perspective." Uh, Brother Jalal Hashim has demonstrated the kind of wisdom and the kind of intelligence that is necessary for us to truly understand the significance of Arabization of the Sudan. He's brilliant. He is courageous. He is bold. He is speaking truth. And if you do not have this book, this is a book that you have to have. You cannot understand Sudan unless you have "To Be or Not to Be." You got to get this book by Jalal Hashim. And it would be very, very useful for all of you who are interested in this topic. I'm delighted, and I'm happy and pleased, very happy and pleased, that we are able to have such a Pan-African perspective. Most people don't realize that Sudan was actually before Ghana in terms of independence on the African continent. But because Sudan's leadership defined it as an Arab country rather than an African country, we normally say Ghana was the first independent country in Africa, but that's not true. Actually, two countries, Egypt in 1952 and Sudan in 1956, preceded Ghana in 1957. So, but the black people, the African people of Sudan, are taking back their country. This is the incredible thing. The Kushites and the Nubian cultures, the people who created the earliest civilization in humanity, are now in a position to try to recognize and create what we might call a democratic Sudan, a democratic government, one that is important and significant, you see, in terms of current civilization. So we're happy here at the Malefic Keti Asante Institute, and we're very proud of the people who have come, those of you who are here with us. I just want to make a couple of quick announcements before we bring our speakers to the platform. The first one is that we are going to take a break for the month of June, and we'll come back in the month of July. July 14th, July 14th to 16th, we're having the Summer Institute here. The Summer Institute is an institute, a Pan-African institute, to discuss questions of the African agenda for the new age. And this African agenda will be involved with questions of epistemology, questions of theory. How do you get truth, and how do you get a true understanding and appreciation of what we're facing? So we're looking at all philosophies. We're going to look at all of them, and we're going to have 2 days of intense discussion, and we hope everybody can come. And if you need a scholarship, just let us know, but we certainly want you to be a part of this discussion and the kinds of positions that we will be exploring. So remember that. Put that on your calendar. Some of you have already registered for it, so that's a good thing. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to say is that we are uh, nonpartisan uh, think tank, and we are international in our scope. We believe and teach that African people are the civilizers of the human race. We are, of course, at the very core of humanity, as Africa gave the world. All Homo sapiens come out of Africa. So all of us, 8 billion people on the earth, come out of Africa. We have African DNA in us, you see. So we believe that. And we also believe that it is essential that African people always advance progressive ideologies, uh, that we're on a trajectory for justice and a trajectory for world peace. And we fight for that. We believe in that. We think that is the necessary thing for us to establish in the world a society or societies where human beings respect each other. That's what we do. That's the essence of Ma'at. Is at the very beginning of ethics in the world. There are no ethics before these ethics, you see. So that's fundamental. So I want to also at this time just thank the board members of this organization, certainly Carlton Sudan and Stan Strader and Nadav and Kareem Boyd, who is not with us today, but is really our technical advisor, and other people who have helped push us. And I want to thank also, the dynamic people, all of you who have been coming every day, every time, rather, we have meetings. And I just appreciate you. I mean, I'm in awe of you. And that's the kind of thing that will give us, put us forward. I was always, I mean, he just, this brother Sawyer just started coming recently, and I'm happy to see Brother Sawyer. I think we went to Africa together, and so he's here with us now. And many of you have gone to the continent with me. And so I want to also say that one of the best colleagues I've ever had, and I've been teaching for 40 years at universities, is this young brother sitting right here, Dr. Jabali Ade. He is an innovator. He is a creator. He is an academic scholar of the greatest rigor. He and I are working on a project today that I think will be very, very beneficial to people. And I just want to publicly let people know that Jabali Ade is one of those people that I believe is essential and necessary for us in terms of understanding and appreciating the new world that we're confronting. That I would always want to be with him and work with him in his endeavors. And he's a great scholar and a great teacher. And thank you very much for recognizing that, all of you. Yes, sir. African Liberation Day. Thank you so much. African Liberation Day. We have we got a program coming up. We got there's several programs for I want to announce that several programs for African Liberation Day. We actually have an African Liberation celebration that's going to be a day after. That's going to be run by with with Stan Strader. We're doing it on the 26th. And on the 26th, if you can write this down, on the 26th at 2 o'clock, at Temple University, at room 107, Gladfelter Hall. We are having an ambassador. We're having diplomats. We're having African thinkers and scholars. Dr. Nadav, Dr. Zizwe Poe. We're having people to talk about the whole issue of African liberation, which is not just physical liberation, but mental liberation as well. That's what we're talking about. African Liberation Day, a great day. On the day before, I will be in Jamaica speaking by Zoom in Jamaica, speaking on African Liberation Day. And then later on, I will also be speaking in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So there's a lot of things around African liberation that we're engaged in and that we're involved in. And I just want to, praise the African people for standing up for truth. I mean, if nobody else in the world stands up for it, African people will tell you the truth. And I appreciate that, and I'm honored to be just a part of the community. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce actually two of the most. Well, first of all, let me just say I'm sort of blushing, but let me just say that two brothers who come from the land of my mother. I did my DNA, and my DNA took me right back to their homeland. So that's why I always embrace these brothers from Sudan, because that's where my mother's ancestry comes from. So I'm so happy to have Tanutamon Gerais. I've known him now maybe 10 years or so. We've been struggling and working together for such a long time on the Sudanese issue in question. And I'm just proud of the work that he's doing in trying to educate African Americans to what's going on in Sudan. He's insistent on us knowing the truth and understanding it. So we're going to have, Tanutamon is an activist. He is, of course, a strong Pan-Africanist. His work has been recognized by people in different places. And I once met him, I think it must have been at Hampton, one of the universities in Virginia, maybe Virginia, Virginia Union, I think it was. So I'm just really, really proud of the work that he's doing for our community and for the world community. And then after him will be a young man that I came to know lately, that is a student of mine at Temple University, but has really become my junior brother in many ways because he has taught us many things in the department that he's in about Sudan. Most people misunderstand Sudan. Well, and it's possible to be misunderstood because it is a country that has at least, and they will correct me, at least 300 different ethnic groups. So you got a whole lot of different people with different languages and different concepts going on in that country. But part of the problem, as they will explain, I am sure, is the Arabization of the country by 15% of the population. That's a problem when the Arabization does not recognize the Africanity of the people. So at this time, I think we're going to have Brother Tanutamon to please come up first, and we're going to ask all of you to turn your phones off. We're on live streaming on YouTube, and we will be having many people coming, and so we thank you very much for being here. At this time, Brother Tanutamon, you can have it. Thank you.
Hotep, everybody. Thank you, MKA Institute. Thank you, Brother Mulefe Asante. We've been together working in issue of Africa and specifically Sudan issue since 2011. We met at Virginia Union University. Since that time, we are very good friends, we are brothers, and we are working together. I will talk about Sudan problem. Everybody knows there is a fight going on in Sudan. Now it's in the capital, Khartoum. This fight is created by the Sudan government, Sudanese government. I will take you in a journey about Sudan, what means Sudan, and how it's become Sudan and why. So after that, you're going to listen all the other news and details on TV. Sudan, we get independent from Britain in 1956. Since the first day, the people, Sudanese who run the country, they steer it toward Arabia, Arab League, Arab Union. And that was by design of Egypt dictator Nasser of Egypt. He insists that Sudan have to go join Arab League. And some Arab country was rejecting that, but dictator Nasser, he imposed his idea because he have Arab nationalism theory or ideology. So we joined Arab League and we became Arabized. And then a few years later, Nasser, he engineered a coup d'etat to change the education from English language to Arabic language. So he engineered coup d'etat of General Nimeri in 1969. And Nimeri ruled Sudan for 16 years with iron fist by Arab nationalism. And all after that, all governments came to Sudan. They ran it as an Arab country until a Muslim Brotherhood, one of the radical political Islam organization, they captured Sudan in 1989, and then they established Sharia law, Islamic Sharia law, and they ran the Sudan for 30 years under Sharia law and imposing Arab ideology on people of Sudan. Sudan, it's Arabic word. Sudan linguistically mean land of blacks. But politically, it means three things. It means land of blacks, land still owned by blacks, land not yet taken from blacks. Now they are taking the land. All this war since 56 going on, Arabia is trying to take the land of blacks. But when they call us land of blacks, this is not the name of the country. This is a label. This is a label by patriarchal culture of Arabia in West Asia. They label us land of blacks. But politically, they mean land of slaves, where they used to get slaves. And Sudan is not a geographical country called Sudan. Sudan is a big line, what they call sub-Saharan countries. From all the way from Ethiopia, from Red Sea until Atlantic Ocean. It carries Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, Chad, Niger, Mali, Senegal, Ghana. All these countries are Sudan, are land of slaves politically. So we stuck under name of Sudan, and the people who run Sudan, they was mentally Arabized, educated in Arabia, like in Egypt. So they accept the word Sudan instead of the country was Nubia, known as Nubia in the history. But problems start when, since 56, the non-Arabized Sudanese, the indigenous African, they reject this Arab ideology of Sudan. First, the South Sudanese, and they fight back to preserve their culture, their heritage, African culture. But the state of Sudan waged war against South Sudanese. That was a big war. South Sudanese lost around 6 million lives until 2011. They gained their freedom, and now they are independent country, and they saved their identity and their culture. But Arabized Sudan is still carrying on its ideology, Arabian ideology, West Asian ideology. After South Sudan get independent, the central state, waged war against hill Nubians, what we call them Nuba Mountains in Kurdistan, and then Darfur, and then Blue Nile. All these groups, hill Nubians, Darfurians, and Blue Niles, those are indigenous African. They don't want to give up their heritage, their culture, their languages. They refuse to be Arabized. So the state, central state, totally Arabized, they use the whole country power and wage war against Nubian in Nuba Mountain and in Darfur and in Blue Nile. From 2003 to 2007 or 2005, we lost over 300,000 lives in Darfur by the government of Sudan. And same or more in Kurdistan, Nuba Mountain, and same or more in Blue Nile. But what the state of Sudan, Arabized Sudan, what they did, they went by the help of our masters in Arabia, in West Asia. They went to West Africa, and they brought nomad Arabized black from West Africa, those people who create chaos in West African countries. Few years ago, 10, 15 years ago, there was a big problem in Africa by same group. They brought this group to Sudan, and they trained them militarily, and they gave them the weapon from a wealthy Arab country in the Persian Gulf, and they used them against Darfurian and Hill Nubians and Blue Niles. So these people, what they call them now, Janjaweed, Arabized Black, RSF, Rapid Support Force, these all confused black, Arabized blacks. They use them in Darfur, and these people, they burn Darfur upside down. They burn villages, they kill people, they rape girls, and now millions of Darfurian, they live in the desert with no accommodation, with no help, with no food, with nothing. By these people, by what we call them Janjaweed, Sudan government who brought them and trained them, called them RSF, but those are Arabized blacks. They came to do Arabizing indigenous African in Darfur and Kurdistan and Blue Nile. These people, Arabized blacks who came from West Africa, now is being used, they used in Arabian war, proxy war in Yemen. They use them in Shia-Sunna issue. Islam are two factors, Sunna and Shia, and they are in war against each other from the beginning of Islam. They use these people in Yemen, and now they're using them in Khartoum. These people, they create chaos in Khartoum, and now they fighting Sudan army and Janjaweed. But let us see, Sudan army is Arabized black. They are not African army. They ideologically, they built to support, to protect Arab ideology in land of Sudan. So now we are between two Arabized blacks, Sudan army and the Janjaweed, RSF. They fighting, they burning Khartoum, and some people are fleeing, and some people are still trapped in between these two groups. But let us go in a quick journey to Sudan together to see why this is happening in Sudan. As we said in the beginning, Sudan is an Arabic word, and it's an ideological, political label. It is not name of the country. And who label you is your master. And in this case, our master is Arabia. They label us because Arabia, their philosophy is a patriarchal-based philosophy. They create a social ladder, and they put Arabia on the top of that ladder, and then Persian, Indian, and North African in the middle, and the black Muslims, black African at the bottom of that ladder. This is a code. It's decoded in the black Muslim society in Africa. We know it. I am a Muslim. I born and raised in a Muslim family, Muslim community, but I became aware of the crisis, of the problem. So Arab, they label us, and it seems to be we internalize this Arabian ideology that we are black Arabs. And you see Sudanese people, when you see them here, thousands of them, they ran away from the Islamic State in Sudan, run by radical Muslims, Muslim Brotherhood and Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. Together they work, they create Islamic State, but we after long struggle, we get rid of them, but still they capturing the society and the whole structure of the country. And now these groups are fighting, but the people of Sudan, the indigenous people, they have nothing to do with this fight, because those groups, they are fighting because they have to take land of blacks. In the beginning, we say the Sudan means land of blacks, land is still owned by blacks, land not yet taken from blacks. They are taking the land from their slaves. So this is what's going on in Sudan. And you see, due to this long slavery and long slave history of Arabia to East Africa, we lost our memory. They erase our memory. We don't remember our great names. We start using our masters' names in Sudan. See all Sudanese, 1,000 Sudanese here, they are blacks in color, But mentally, we are not blacks. Mentally, we are Asian. We are Arabized. That's why we wear Arabic name. Abdullah, Abdul Karim, Ali, Umar, and then girls, Fatima, Khadija. But where is our great names? Oh, we don't know where is our great name. We lost everything. I will talk about a professor interviewed, Sudanese professor interviewed yesterday at one of the Persian Gulf rich country TV by his master. He's a professor teaching their kids in university. This professor, I will call him Professor X. The conclusion of his idea saying, in Sudan, we don't have unity, we don't have country until Arab came with Arabization and Islamization. The Arab, Islam, and Arabic language united us as in the country. So that is tell you how deep we are dislocated, culturally dislocated, and how we entered the level of self-hatred. This Professor X, he don't know that one of the great Kemetic Nubian king named Menes created the first nation in the Nile Valley in Kemet in Egypt in the human history. 3,200 BC, he created a nation. This Professor X, Sudanese, he don't know this. Professor X, he don't know the great Nubian Merwatic king of Arkamaniko in Merwi. He separate between the state and religion in 300 BC. He don't know about this. This Professor X, he don't know about great queens, women ruled Nubia and Kemet, and like Amani Rinas, who confront Roman Empire in Wasiti, north of Aswan, what they call today Luxor, I believe. He don't know this great woman warrior Amani Rinas, and then the great warrior Amani Shekido, and all great women. Nile Valley ruled from 250 BC to 100 AD by great queen women. We call them Kandakas, Candaces. 42 women ruled Nile Valley civilization from 250 BC to 100 AD. Professor X, he don't know this. Professor X represent us, the Sudanese. We are dislocated. We are not conscious. If we are conscious, we will use our great names. We will name our children with these great names. Professor X, he don't know that the great Nubian king Teharko, who marched in 701 BC, he marched to the Jerusalem and saved kingdom of Judea from destruction of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, when the king of Judea asked help. King Teharko was 18 years old, and he was ruling Nubia, Kush, and Kemet, Egypt. And he marched, he led his army by himself, and he saved kingdom of Judea. And from it comes out Christianity and Islam as an offshoot. And this is, I quote this from the book of Dr. Henry Oben, Rescue of Jerusalem in 701 BC. Dr. Henry Oben, he did his PhD in Harvard University. He is a Canadian. He is still alive, and you can communicate with him. Professor X, who was interviewed yesterday in Arabian TV, he represents Sudanese. He represents mindset of Sudanese. We all Professor X. We say we are in the same mind. Arabia, they erase our memory, historical memory, and then we became confused blacks. Even though we are in color, in shape, we are blacks, but mentally we are not blacks. We are Asian mentally. We wear Asian name, we speak Asian language, and we accept when Sudan and Nasser of Egypt impose Arabic language as the state language in the land of blacks, land of slaves. I remember when I was a child, back in the time, millions of Sudanese, 99 Sudanese was not Arab, they was not Arabized. They was not speaking a word Arabic, and I was not. When I went to school, I tortured to speak Arabic. I humiliated and millions of Sudanese students in the first grade to pick up Arabic language. And that is by Arab nationalism of Nasser of Egypt and Arab League. That is why we reach this level of, you see today, we killing each other, and Sudan state wipe out 6 million South Sudanese because they don't want to be Arabized, and 300,000 Darfurian because they don't want to be Arabized, and same or more number for Hill Nubians in Kordofan and in Blue Nile. We are confused people. We internalize the inferiority. This is a true. That is why we are not in a black mind. We don't believe in African philosophy, African methods, African idea. We believe in Asian methods, Asian idea. Professor X, he don't know about philosophy of Ma'at, the Ma'aticity. Professor X, who was interviewed yesterday, he don't know about this. He think philosophy came from Arabia and from Europe. And that Professor X represent us. We are Sudanese. We dumped our names, our country name, our people's name, our town's name, and we adapt West Asian culture, Arabian culture. If you go to Khartoum, all schools named by Arab names. All towns in the capital named by Arab names in Persian Gulf and in Egypt. We are confused people, confused blacks, and we hate ourselves. We hate blackness. We don't appreciate that. This is a level we entered by Arabization. This Islamo-Arabization is an ideology. It's an ideology. It's not about Islam as a faith. We don't criticize Islam as the faith, but we criticize the ideology of Islamo-Arabization because that erases our memory and make us anti to our own history. When you see a Sudanese wearing Asian name and fighting for Arabian cause and Arabian wars and fighting his own people in Sudan to advance the methods of Arabia, it shows you how we are dislocated culturally, how we hate ourselves. This is what Sudan is. That is why you see now there is a fight between two Arabized groups, Sudanese Arabized government and West Asian nomad Arabized brought by wealthy Arab countries. So to know these things, when you listen to what's going on in Sudan, knowing this, it shows you the root cause of the problem. And this is a root cause, and Sudanese people, they don't talk about it. Maybe they don't know. And the major problem, When you have a problem and you don't know you have a problem, you cannot work to fix it.
That's right.
The first you have to acknowledge you have a problem. Then you work to fix the problem. We don't know. We are happy where we are. We are in a coma, deep coma. We don't wake up yet. So when we try to wake up, they inject us saying, oh no, that is Africanism, Afrocentricity is a racism. They said, oh, Sudan problem is a class struggle. It is not a class struggle. It's a cultural struggle. Sudan problem is a cultural struggle. So, due to this brainwash, we hate ourselves. We run away from blackness. Even though Nubia is today's Sudan, Nubia is a mother of African civilization. Nubia gave birth to a lot of civilization, like Punt civilization in East Africa, Punt, and Aksum civilization, these two in East Africa, Songhai civilization in West Africa, Ashanti civilization in West Africa, Minobutama civilization in South Africa, Zimbabwe civilization in South Africa. Those all are the daughters of the Nubian civilization. And the eldest daughter of Nubian civilization is Kemet, Egypt. Now Egypt is destroying her mother, Nubia. Neither of Egypt, dictator, neither of Egypt, ultra-Arab nationalist, he flooded total lower Nubia to where I born in Second Cataract in Sudan. I used to live among the historical monuments and historical sites. Now everything is gone under the Nile water. And for more humiliation, they call it Lake Nasir. They don't call it Lake Nubia. The word Nubia they don't want to hear because they think they kill it and they finish it. So this is what about Sudan, and this is what means Sudan, and this is a problem of Sudan, and we are in crisis by Islamo-Arabization. It's a political ideology, and this Islamo-Arabization, what they did, they carve the methods of reality in the concept of Arabia, and they advance it through the vehicle of Islam. And that is what we have to criticize and analyze and talk and study. Thank you very much, sisters and brothers. And Hutep again. Thank you, my brother. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank this brother. He's a great brother here. So we will have questions and answers after our next speaker, who will also have about 25 minutes, and that's Brother Tugu Sanousi. Brother Tugu.
Thank you, Dr. Asante.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asante. Thank you, brothers and sisters. It's a great pleasure and opportunity again to stand in front of you, and also a great information from the brother Tanutamon. And I have, I think, the first background. I think he already talked about it, and then I'm just going to go briefly over it. But he left no room for people just to grasp the historical or maybe a historical context in which the current issue is occurring. So he gave a brief introduction, and that's what I have in the first slide that I had about the wars. We see the war in Khartoum, but to understand the current reality, you must connect it to the wars that Brother Tanutamon talked about. And that's briefly the war in South Sudan that he gave a very good insight about it. It started in 1955, the war in Eastern Sudan, and the war in Darfur, and the war in Nuba Mountains that he also explained. And also he talked about, now let's just, my focus is war in Khartoum, because this is what we see every day, and this is what people are suffering every day, and the situation is getting worse. So basically what I did, and I presented something 2 weeks ago about the root causes of the problem that we see today. And basically, as I quote, this is in one of the Institute of Peace, and I try to capture the main reason or the foundation upon which these people are fighting. The fighting is different than what Sudan has experienced in the past, and that's what Brother Tanutamon has explained. So during the previous wars in Darfur, Blue Nile, and the South Sudan, and the Kordofan, Nuba Mountains, the Sudanese government or the paramilitary groups always fought against the armed resistance movements. So that's what he gave. We have seen that there were movements that emerged, that appeared in the peripheries, where the South Sudan, Darfur, and the government norm is to form a counterinsurgency movement or counterinsurgency forces to counter those movements. But now at this one, the RSF, as he said, it's evolution. It came from Janjaweed, evolved to the board of the units, and it came to the RSF. And as he said, it's a fighting paramilitary force that was created by Bashir. So the force that today it became a paramilitary forces is a creation of the central government that created to crash down the movements that emerged in the peripheries of the Sudan. So the RSF is not a rebel group according to what they created, because what they did, again, it recognized by the law and it was developed, tolerated, and sustained, and an instrument of the state of the power. So actually it's one of the structure that the central government developed to preserve the power in the central government. So now that group has to turn against the person who created. That's why the confusion comes in. So the mission, then my question always was, and then in order to understand RSF, then everybody, I'm sure he or she may ask what was the mission upon which the RSF has been created. So by knowing the mission of RSF that being created, then it will provide a better understanding. The next statement also explaining the current war that we have is also shown in the White House website, that the statement that released by the White House. The Sudanese people suffered 30 years under an authoritarian regime, but they never gave up on their commitment to democracy or their hope for a better future. Their dedication brought down a dictator only to endure a military takeover in October 2021, and now no more. Now more violence among the factions fighting for the control. That's the main point that I want also to stress. So the fighting is going on between two factions, as the brother explained. It's about the power control. There is no ideological differences between these two groups. Each one I could describe as a militia that wants to preserve the power and the interest that belongs to. But the people, as I said, I will come to that point. Right. So then this led me to another question to ask, that because the summit was about the democracy in Sudan. And if we need to talk about the democracy of Sudan, I always ask myself, was there any attempt for the creation of a democratic government in Sudan as a history? So since 1956 up to this moment, have we ever seen any attempt, or maybe just some kind of, trying to bring a government that represents a diversity of all more than 300 ethnic communities? I have never seen any attempt. The evidence, the truth, or the evidence has never shown that there was a trial. I would say that there was an attempt, and that attempt always, when they try 2-3 years, it will cut off by the military forces. What are the evidence that demonstrate the attempt? That's what my question. Because if you talk about democracy, then now we're fighting for democracy, as the two leaders are claiming. I will come back to that point. Then I have never seen any attempt. But I will acknowledge, or I will say, everybody will see that there was an attempt when Hamdok was appointed as the first prime minister for trying to bring or discuss things that can allow Sudanese people one day to have a democratic government. That's my argument. So I may ask a different question by saying, was there any attempt to create a country that reflects the cultural and linguistic diversity of Sudan? Hamdok appointment, as I said, was a promising attempt for forming a government that may reflect some kind of diversity. However, the example I've seen, because my argument is based on the example that I saw during his term when he was in office for 2 years. What happened? There was a discussion of a new language policy. So if the government is trying to bring or to discuss a new language policy, it's an acknowledgement for diversity of language that are existing in the country, and trying to create a language policy that reflects our diversity in Sudan. And I remember one of the friends or one of the people that I talked to, there was a discussion of bringing a similar language policy of South Africa, where 11 languages are official languages in the constitution. And the Sudan has more than 300 ethnic groups, and if I'm not mistaken, more than 200 languages. So then the question would be, what would be the best language policy that can reflect a Sudanese community? There was a discussion in that part. That's why the military group, they don't like that kind of discussion. So I call it an attempt in which will bring some sort of the democratic government that everybody can see himself. Then another discussion, there was a discussion of the federal system of each region, because the central government doesn't want Sudan to have a federal system, which each region has its own particularity or its own way of ruling, and as South Sudan was requesting before the independence. And that was one of the major problems when South Sudanese say we need our federal system because we're different in so many ways. Then the central government refused that. So now there's a discussion about the federal system. And this is what is scared the military, the generals that are fighting today, because we can't allow anything of a federal system that each region has its own autonomous government. Then we have a central government. They say, no, we can't allow that. I think it's one of the causes as well. There was a discussion of the reforms of a military structure, and as a brother talked about. So, and this could be, in my judgment, as the main problem that has appeared in what they call a framework agreement, al-ittifaq al-itari. So the main thing, as I believe, is about reformation, how to reform the military structure that is all centered in one particular group or centered in one particular ideology. And then that broke into, I don't want to go in details, but I believe that that's one of the issues that also has led to arrest of the Hamdok and also what's happening at the moment. There was a discussion about questioning the membership of Sudan in Arab League, and what Brother Tanutamon has also explained. So people are asking, why do we will be in the Arab League while we got so many different ways of doing things? Why shouldn't we recenter ourselves into African Union or African, centeredness? What makes us to be part of Arab League? Everybody will ask that question. Why Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the Arab world are insisting the existence of the Sudan, membership of Sudan as a part of the Arab nation? So these kind of discussions that has terrified these two generals. And then Hamdok was removed from the power. That's my judgment. But there's so many things that have happened. Also, I would say that these are types of the discussion, as I said, Francis Deng, the very prominent South Sudanese writer, he explained in his book in 1995, and he was talking about identity. And he clearly said that the ideal option, through though perhaps at least the visible, would be redefine and restructure the national identity to be more encompassing and more equitable, equitably integrating. So he brings that point that he made in 1955. It speaks to this moment and the remarks that did by the brother Tanutamon. Right. Then in conclusion, I just say, let me bring the fresh information that happened yesterday, or the agreement that was signed yesterday in Saudi Arabia. And the agreement was known as on short-term ceasefire agreement and humanitarian arrangement was signed yesterday, and it says that the parties agreed to facilitate the delivery and the distribution of humanitarian assistance, restore essential services, and withdraw forces from hospitals and essential political facilities. The parties also agreed to facilitate the safe passage of the humanitarian actors and the commodities, allowing goods to flow unimpeded from the ports of entry to population in need. But that was fresh yesterday, and I hope these two generals can commit at least to allow people to get the basic needs so that they can survive, and then the discussion will be taken to another level. So the points that I concluded my presentation, which I don't want to take that much time, were 5 points. So always the fallacy is that each one of these generals is claiming to be fighting for the civilian rule system and democracy, where the reality is not true. So it's just a claim that if you are trying to bring a democracy, you shouldn't remove Hamadov from office. At least you should allow him to do his trial, or let him do some reforms that he promised to for Sudanese to have a new structure or new beginning in their life. 2, each general is mobilizing the public to gain a significant support, and that's what we see every day in the social media, in every platform. Each general is mobilizing the people to get a support and to say that I got a people that support me, and then I should insist on defeating the other part. And that's happening on a daily basis, unfortunately. So again, the situation is getting, or daily getting worse, and no sign of de-escalation. And my brother could see that, and also the evidence is showing that there's no any de-escalation. Every day, people are dying every day. Situation is getting worse, out of control. And these military generals, they're mobilizing their resources outside, inside, their support outside the country, inside the country, so that they can get a great support. Public is divided. If I'm not mistaken, today the public is divided. Some calling for the immediate cessation of hostilities. Most of the people are saying no, and I will add my voice to them, that there should be a stop of the killing of people. There should be immediate cessation of the of hostilities. And some people, as I said, they are behind the other general, and there's some people behind the ex-general. So community people are divided. Point number 4 or 5, there is a heavy influence of the Arab world. The brother Tanutamon, he said that, and the talks, we have seen the talks that hosted in Saudi Arabia. And then I had a discussion with a friend in the campus last week, and then we were just saying that if there was any kind of a discussion, then from a geography of reason that we study in the department, so why shouldn't these talks will be in one of the African soils? Why shouldn't these talks will be in Addis Ababa, or should be in Chad or South Africa, or maybe Zimbabwe? What makes Saudi Arabia and also the Middle East insisting that the Sudanese talks should be held in Saudi Arabia? So there's so many things, and this also reminded me a video or maybe news that I was following when the president of Kenya, William Ruto, was saying that these generals must stop this nonsense. They are bombing bridges, they are bombing hospitals, they are bombing kids. They don't know what they're doing. So this should be stopped. And I hope these kind of voices to be made from different African leaders. We shouldn't let this issue to be handled by Saudi Arabia. It's an African issue. It's an African problem. That African people, wherever they are in the continent, they should raise their voice so that there should be immediate stop for this killing. But this is not happening. Each one, maybe I would, in my judgment, their view, because Saudi Arabia has already hijacked the issue and placed it in their own country with their own interests and influence that they want to put inside that issue. Right. So then that's what the question that I put. What is the role of African Union, and why the talks were not hosted in Addis Ababa? And everybody maybe has his own judgment and analysis for that. And I will stop there. So I think very brief. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, have learned so much today. You know, sometimes we think we know things and we don't. I remember actually being in Aswan and then taking a trip to Abu Simbel in the south of Egypt. This is the south is called Upper Egypt, and looking at the lake that flooded so many towns and cities and temples that the Nubian people had created. And I was saddened by that because I said those nearly 200 or 300 towns and villages that are under the lake, we will never know what was there. It was almost like it was an erasure of the African culture that was at the very core of civilizing the world. And what these brothers have done this afternoon has been so great because you have given us this information and this knowledge. Now, there are questions that people have, and I'm going to ask if you have questions, please, take the microphone from Dr. Ade and ask your question to these brothers. There are many questions I have in my head about this. I'm very, very disturbed by this. So please, are there questions? Please raise your hand.
Yeah, this for either Brother Tugu or Brother Tanutamon. We assume that the people who are fighting against the indigenous folks are getting their weapons from Saudi Arabia and from other Arab-speaking countries. So the question is, where are the indigenous folks getting their weapons from? Or are they getting weapons from some other place?
So where are the weapons coming from for this war that's going on? Who wants to answer that? Either one of you could answer it. Where are the weapons coming from? And maybe you should come up here so that our audience on YouTube can see you.
Yes, the weapons for both sides, what the Sudan military and the militia, Arabized militia, both they get weapon from Arabia. Arabian, they helping both sides. That's why Brother Togo was highlighted the interference of Arabia in this issue. This is an African issue supposed to be solved in African countries and African idea. And the indigenous people, they have movement like SPLM and in Darfur also, Abdul Wahid. These people, nobody helps them. They just, when they win a war against the Sudan army, they capture the weapon and they use it. But nobody gave weapon to the indigenous African because the war, the whole idea is about imposing Islamo-Arabization deep in Africa. That's all the idea. That's why you see Arab influence in this conflict. They're not interested to solve it. They're interested to empower their part. And Sudan army and the militia, the Arabized Janjaweed, they are both their mindset, their ideology is Arabization. Yeah, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Can you talk about the comprehensive peace accord and the referendum that went on in 2011, and also about John Gerais, who I think wanted to become the vice president of Sudan. He's from, of course.
Can we? You got the? He has the microphone. All right.
Yeah,
okay.
Can you discuss John Gerais? Can you discuss discuss the Comprehensive Peace Accord? Can you discuss the referendum? I was in Sudan in 2010 when they had the election.
Right.
And I've lived in Sudan for some time.
Right.
You're going back a couple of years ago. And much of what you said, I agree with 100%. The Arabization of Sudan is just so prevalent among our people there.
Right.
So, but the questions about the Comprehensive Peace Accord, I'd really appreciate, as well as what you thought about the election in 2010.
Right. If I can briefly answer that as much as I can and as I know, Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed in 2005 between SPLM, Sudan Liberation Movement in South Sudan, and the government of Sudan. And that, based on that agreement, South Sudan got a referendum in 2011 in which they decided that either you want to be part of Sudan or you want to be independent state. So in 2011, they overwhelmingly voted that they want to be independent state. And now from 2011, South Sudan is independent state, is separate from Sudan. But as you said, the issue Brother Tanutamon highlighted in the beginning, it's all connected. To understand the current reality, then it must be connected to the issue of the South Sudan. So South Sudan now is a fully independent state in 2011. They got their own resources, on country, on policies, and they're working and developing their own country. So now the power that the Sudan, which is, they refuse to be called North Sudan, because basically in knowledge, when there's South, then there's a North. But the other part, we call it Sudan. We don't put the word North Sudan. We just say Sudan, which represent Khartoum and Darfur and Nuba Mountain, Blue Nile, and the other part. So then when the country became us two, then now the problems are more internalized, because at that beginning, the central government was fighting the movements in the south, and the movement now, the focus, it went to the Darfur and to the east and Nuba Mountain. Then also they managed to, I would say, to mitigate or to lower the risk of the movements that endangering the central government. Then now the war, it came internally between these two generals, as we see the result today. So I hope I answered your question, but it will take more time to.
You did mention John Gerais.
Yeah, Dr. John Grant, yes, the founder of the SPLM in 1983. So, and then he passed away, unfortunately, in 2005, 3 weeks after he signed a peace agreement. And then at that time, I was in Khartoum. I was at college, and we remember that we went to a Freedom Square, known as the Sahel Khadra, and then we received him, welcomed him. It was overwhelming. Everybody was shocked with the amount of people that came that day. But he passed away in 2005, and then reasons were unknown. So many things people say, but I don't have any reason for that. But we know the plane crash. He was in Uganda and then trying to come back to Khartoum. Then the plane crashed in the South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, there are a couple of questions from the audience, the YouTube audience, and I'll try to repeat them. I'm not sure whether you could see me, but I believe everybody else can see us on YouTube. Mutu asked a question asked a question actually to Tanutamon, whether or not is it the same, this situation of the lack of consciousness, isn't it the same for all of Africa? Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, yes, brother. The unconsciousness, it's a disease in Africa, but I was focused in Sudan issue, right. And I have a name of Sudan Sudan problem. I call it Sudan disease. Sudan disease is a black Sudanese wearing Asian name, supporting Asian philosophy, advancing Asian methods, and then he turned against his own African methods, African idea. That is Sudan disease. But it seems to be this is the case in many Africa also. Yes, that's the same case. Yes.
So in a similar vein, in a similar vein, Cushite boy asked a question that given the fact of this agreement that was reached recently between the two warring factions of Arabized leaders, who will respect these agreements? And I guess a question that I want to add to that is, what does this mean? Is this war, and this is for either of you, is this war a possibility for a restructuring of the political system in the country so that the majority of the people, the indigenous people, wake up and take their country democratically? Is it possible that there will be militias or groups of indigenous people or some of these armies in the Nuba Mountains and other places who will also assume, much like the SPL, the Southern Sudanese did, and fight in order to get their own liberation and freedom? I mean, it's just a question.
I think this crisis of Sudan will bring self-consciousness and self-respect to the younger generation. My generation, the old people, our brain set is by our masters. It's very difficult to teach old dog new trick. But the new generations, the college kids and school kids, they will benefit from this because before in our time, the conflict was folded. And if you speak up, it's, oh, you are racist. Afrocentrism is a racism. Afrocentricity is a racist. Don't talk. That is Islamophobia. That is racism against Arabia. But the young generation, they see the situation in a plain way. That's the central government itself, it's in a problem. And it's advancing Arabian, Asian ideology, Asian methods. So yes, new generation they will benefit and they will come out with a new idea. And actually the new generation who born in diaspora, the kids here, for example, Sudanese kids in United States, they are picking up their African identity. Quickly they are picking up, and they are inter-talking with us in these issues about identity and about the languages, learning African languages, because it's very dangerous tool. When you drop your language, you drop your culture, because language is a container of the culture. And that's why Arabia target African languages. Nasser of Egypt imposed Arabic language in the state, and they said African languages are sub-languages, are animal languages. Especially they said African language is Rutana. Rutana means the sound of camel. Arabia is a culture of camel. So when you label some people, they speaking animal language, so they are not, it means you are saying they are not human, they are animal. So this genocide in the beginning start as a cultural genocide, and then now it's moved a physical genocide to the targeted indigenous. And how you know in Sudan who is Arab and who is indigenous? You cannot tell by looking. Only when they speak. Who speak African language, you know. So this is not Arabized. This have to go. And who dropped the African languages and picked Arabic from their grandparents, time of grandparents? Those are the people who rule in Sudan. Those are the people who interviewed in the Arabian TV. Those are the people who the journalists talking to Arabian media. And one of them is Professor X I was talking about. Thank you.
Okay. Wow, this has been great. Well, thank you so much. I just want to make one other political comment, and that's this. There is also a political part, an international political crisis with Sudan's upheaval, and that has to do with Ethiopia. And we haven't brought that into the discourse lately, but we were in Ethiopia maybe a year and a half ago, and maybe, no, it was 2019, I think it was, 2020, in Ethiopia. And they were building then the Great Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, because Lake Tana, which is one of the huge lakes and historic lakes in the world, is a huge contributor through the Abe River, the Blue Nile, so to speak, into the Nile River. And they're building this dam, and the Egyptians do not want this dam built. They didn't want to build it. It's basically built, finished now. And the issue is that if Arabia could somehow siphon off Sudan into the Arabian camp totally, it will be able to prevent, they think, Ethiopia. In fact, they are saying they may want to go to war with Ethiopia because Ethiopia will control the Nile. That's a big political issue. Most people don't realize that. That the major contributor to the Nile River, as it flows through from Sudan into Egypt, is actually the Blue Nile, because it comes with all that energy from the mountains. And so that is a big, right now, that's what they're talking about. If you talk to the Ethiopian politicians, they're also putting themselves on a footing for military operations if necessary, you see, because they figure, I mean, Ethiopia is a country, actually, it is the second largest populous country in Africa, next to Nigeria. It's a very populous country, and Egypt, of course, is the third largest in terms of population. So there's a real struggle here, political struggle at the international level, that oversees all the internal fighting that's going on in Sudan. How Sudan emerges will have a great say in what the role of Africa will be in the international arena in the next couple of decades. So I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to say we call upon our ancestors far and near, the mother of our mothers, the father of our fathers, to render mercy and to bear witness for the liberation of all oppressed people forever. It is done. Let's give these brothers another applause before we go.